Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome you to this artist talk and catalog presentation of Edison Peñafiel's Landscape exhibition with curator Christian Viveros-Fauné. My name is Angie Gonzalez. I am the gallery administrator here at Piero Atchugarry Gallery, Miami. Piero Atchugarry Gallery started back in 2013 in Uruguay with our very first location where we renovated an existing horse stable and adapted it for an exhibition space in Tierra Garzón. 5 years later, in December of 2018, we expanded to North America with a second location near the Miami Design District. Since then, we have become an integral part of the Miami art scene, introducing our gallery roster of international artists to Miami while also providing a space for local talent. We are extremely honored and proud to be hosting Edison Peñafiel's solo exhibition, Landscape, and the programs organized around it. Stay tuned to our social media for more programs to come, including an online live performance for our closing event. We'd also like to thank the Knight Foundation and the Broward County Cultural Division for their support in realizing the Landscape exhibition. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Edison Peñafiel. Edison is a visual artist whose work creates experiences about the disadvantaged, the migrant, the laborer, the surveilled. Using photography, animation, video, sculpture, and installation, he creates surreal reflections of the realities we participate in and witness every day. Edison was born in Ecuador and came to the U.S. at 17 years old. He received a BFA in Interdisciplinary Arts and Art History from Florida International University. He has presented his works at the Bass Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art North Miami, when receiving the South Florida Consortium Fellowship, and the Orlando Museum of Art, where he was a recipient of the 2019 Florida Prize in Contemporary Art. For his exhibition Landscape, currently on view at Piero Atchugarry Gallery, Miami, he was one of the winners of the Knight Foundation Arts Challenge. His work is also currently on view at the Contemporary Art Center New Orleans in the exhibition Make America What America Must Become, and at USF Contemporary Art Museum in the virtual exhibition Life During Wartime, curated by Christian Viveros-Fauné, who will be in conversation with Edison today. Christian Viveros-Fauné is a New York-based writer and curator, ex-art dealer, and ex-art fair director, art fairs Volta and Next. He has lectured at Yale University, Pratt Institute, and Parsons School of Design, as well as being a visiting critic at the Rhode Island School of Design and Holland's Rietville Academy. A collection of his criticism's greatest hits, Arte en Nueva York, 2001 to 2011, was published in 2012, and Social Forms, A Short History of Political Art, was published by David Zwirner Books in 2018. Also, in 2018, it was announced by the University of South Florida Contemporary Art Museum that Viveros-Fauné will be the curator at large. Simultaneously, he was a Kennedy Family Visiting Scholar at the USF School of Art and Art History during 2018 to 19. As a writer, he was published in, among other venues, Art in America, Art in Australia, ArtNet, Art News, Art Nexus, Art Papers, Art Review, The Baffler, Departures Magazine, El Mercurio, Frieze, Lápiz, La Tercera, Life and Style, Newsweek, King, The New Yorker, The Paris Review Daily, and The Village Voice, for which he was a weekly art critic between 2007 and 2016. Now, I'll leave you with Edison and Christian, who will be in conversation presenting the Landscape catalog. During the presentation, you can write your questions in the chat, and at the end of the conversation, both Christian and Edison will join to share your questions and comments with the panel. We will close with a short video clip of the piece Landscape, as it is currently being presented at the virtual exhibition Life During Wartime at USF Contemporary Art Museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Piero Atchugarry Gallery. Thank you, Edison, for having me on to talk to your work, which, as you know, I am a massive fan of, becoming an ever massiver fan by the day, by the month. I want to start out by sort of saying the obvious, namely that this talk is intended to cover and to celebrate the events that Angie just mentioned. Your recent show, Landscape, at Piero Atchugarry Gallery, but also the upcoming publication of your first book, which fittingly carries the same name, Landscape. In order to cover both of these events properly and via Zoom, again, our friend Danny will occasionally share a screen with us to show what the inside of the catalog looks like, and also what the show itself looks like, because I think that's important to do in these days when we are so tremendously dependent on technologies like the ones we're using right this minute. She will do that as we walk through our conversation by dialing up a slide or two, sometimes with her prompt, sometimes by being the creative, wonderful person that she is. During our conversation, Edison and I may want to refer to an image in the show or a book. So that's what we'll do in that case. And I think that's where she's going right now. Perfect. Also, for the sake of good housekeeping, let me just let you know that Edison and I are basically going to talk about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes or so, till about 4:40, 4:45. And then after that, we will take questions from folks who are following us on Zoom or also via Facebook Live. So I suggest that if you already have questions for Edison, you get to writing them down now to get sort of a jump on things. And if you think of something clever or pressing during the conversation, by all means, jot that down in the form of a query, not a statement, if you can help it, on either of the platforms I just mentioned. Then at the end of this process, we'll again read them out, whereby you, the questioner, will be rewarded with a predictably brilliant answer from Edison. Not exactly an autographed copy of Edison's catalog, but, well, that's our COVID-19 reality, isn't it? Let's start by maybe sort of defining, or again, just walking through in general terms, the show that's up now at Piero Atchugarry Gallery. For those who haven't experienced it yet, I know that in Miami, you can walk into galleries. Actually, you can in New York now as well. You can also walk into museums, though I think you guys have been able to do it for much longer than we have. For those who are local, obviously, when you go again, pick up a catalog. For those who aren't, and as you know, I'm talking to you from New York, from Brooklyn, more specifically, rainy Brooklyn. That's not possible. So I'm eagerly awaiting my copy whenever it arrives in the mail. What we're seeing now is evidently an immersive installation, which is sort of a specialty of Edison's. This one, to quote some of the text that's on the gallery website, features brand new works, including 10 large format mixed media and vibrantly colored compositions on canvas. That's what we're looking at right now. Alongside a multi-channel video installation. That video installation clearly is not in this room, it's elsewhere. Both are putatively sort of on the subject of mass migration. I say putatively because while that may be the overall content of the formal envelope of the work, the presentation that the work makes, it's clearly not the all of the work, and I think that's important to sort of point out. It is not reducible to the content, like many great works of art are not. Crucial as that content is. So more on that later. What I'll continue to sort of quote the gallery description here. Hung also around the gallery are and the walls are a barrier of barbed wire, which you may or may not be able to see accurately. I think you can. That forbidding partition makes even more evident, again, this is the text from the gallery website, the separation between the viewers and these displaced characters. Also in view, a seemingly eternal timeline of travelers in black and white is presented. Here's the video in a triptych video installation that references early French cinema and German expressionism. At the end of the Piero Atchugarry Gallery quotation. So the references that they make there to German expressionism and French cinema, that is inherent in both the paintings and in video work that I think we're going to see later. I'd like to also add, maybe Charlie Chaplin's Tramp, William Kentridge's autobiographical characters, Soho Eckstein, and just about every Samuel Beckett character I can think of. Now, as I just mentioned, immersive installations are something of a specialty for Edison. This is his sort of third iteration of landscape-based works, right? So I think maybe what I wanted to start out with is by asking Edison, maybe one of the most sort of basic of questions. What about if this work is largely about mass migration, and it is, what is it about this global phenomena that made you want to sort of imagine this cohort of paintings? And also, can you walk us through the two earlier iterations? Where were they? What do they consist of? You started making this work in 2019. Here we are towards the end of 2020, and in 2 years' time, you've essentially made 3 bodies of work with the same title, with different media, and in fact, in 2 different states in the U.S., in Texas and in Florida. So, what, not just what inspired you, but what is it about mass migration that really sort of like captured your attention and led you to make all this work?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today in this conversation. And thank you, Anthony, for being part of this presentation. Going back to your question, Christian, I believe what led me to create these paintings, possibility to expand, as you mentioned before, this idea of concept of landscape. I've been working since last year, basically for a year and a half now. So it first began as immersive installation and immersive environment. Then it transformed into a site-specific mural, if you want to say that. And finally, an installation of paintings now on display at Piero Atchugarry Gallery. So there are specific symbolisms for each iteration of this project. In this case, with the paintings, I wanted to tap into the formality of the white wall and the institution, and by presenting this collection of compositions, but then also tapping into art history and playing with concepts of landscape paintings versus migration series, this migration series titled Landscape Paintings. The first iteration of this project was presented during an art residency and produced and presented during this art residency in Corsicana, Texas. The project was mainly focused taking into account the history of the building as a lodge of the Order of the Odd Fellows. So there were rituals that were performed in that place, and as well as reenactments of Old Testament stories, projection devices such as magic lanterns used during the gathering of the Odd Fellows. So to me, the ritualistic reference, and the perpetual loop that my video installation also brings. So there's this perpetual cycle that I try to get with my video work. So there's this situation of never escaping that the characters can never get out of. And so all of these elements came into play with the idea of migration to produce the immersive multimedia installation. Another element was the reenactment of Old Testament stories in this specific place, which for me was taking reference mass migrations such as the Exodus. And also the magic lantern that I mentioned before, it was basically the space being used in a contemporary way, but with the same idea of teaching, of showing any specific thing that the Oddfellows wanted to present. In this case was focus on the beliefs and rituals and testament stories. So the same piece was presented in the South Florida Cultural Consortium exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami. The second iteration of this project was presented and commissioned at the Bass Museum Walgreen Windows project space. This is a site-specific mural installation. And in this occasion, the characters are printed and pasted along with a dynamic composition of barbed wire, which is extended in front of the characters and separating from the viewers or the passerbys.
Edison, let me ask you something. Do you have
Yes.
do you have earbuds on?
Yes.
Maybe take them off and speak directly into the microphone of the computer because it's choppy.
Okay.
And it was absolutely fine when we were in the green room, as it were, but for some reason it's sort of gotten choppy. Or maybe just where you're sitting now will work. So maybe just keep talking now, and maybe just the fact that you sat up closer will change things.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
It's still choppy.
Still choppy?
Yeah.
Wow.
Try without the earbuds, see what that works like. I mean, we can hear you, but it's choppy, that's all.
Yeah, this earbuds microphone. The microphone is
I think it might be the microphone. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's just keep going forward because we can hear you. The issue is that better, but you're doing great. So on the Walgreens windows, which you did with the Bass Museum.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, barbed wire extends in front of these characters, separating the passerbys, the viewers, from the actual characters in the space, in the exhibition space. So this piece uses solid colors representative of a type of landscape. In this case, a more desertic terrain as well as a seascape. In this case, which is a historic or a relevant reference for the migration events associated with Florida.
And what are those migration events associated with Florida?
So Cubans migrating to the coast in Florida, also Haitians. When I first came here, there was this boat full of refugees or migrants coming from Haiti. Was the same laws of dry feed, wet feed was going to apply to them or not. So that was really
everything from 1959 forward, including lots of economic migration, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen Corsicana, right? And we've seen Walgreens, and I think you talked about the paintings. I want to hear a little bit more about the characters. You know, I mean, I think they're clear to a number of us who are sort of in the know because we know your work and we've sort of plumbed it. You know, on the one hand, they seem to be sort of like, you know, quite specific in their, you know, in their activity. They clearly are moving from one place to another, and that's what you're tracking. They also appear sort of designed or costumed to present a sort of like every man or every woman, right? Does that sort of sound accurate to you? What about the dress? What about the masking? I mean, I know that they vary. For example, in the Walgreens windows that we were just looking at, can we go back to that? They look like they're attired. I don't know. You tell me what they're attired like. For me, from here, because I actually didn't see these in person. I've seen reproductions. You know, they look like some Williamsburg hipster went and had a wild time at a vintage shop. But they're wearing these masks, which I sort of want to hear you talk about. Where do these masks come from, for example?
Yeah, well, the idea with this project and the characters which are the focal point, the subject, is that these are nobody and everybody at the same time. So they're projections of humanity. And in the first multimedia installation, they are a projection of living beings, because sometimes I use animals too. So it is the question of migration in general, all living. So the idea is to be unspecific about this personal and collective experience, as these situations resonate globally, especially during these times of mass communication. So the idea is that I have to remove all of these symbolisms and combine these styles of clothing and make it absurd sometimes. And also sometimes removing gender and age, race, etc. So it's being unspecific.
Yeah, you mentioned the Exodus. I also read that the Walgreens piece in particular, that you had styled it or organized it in such a way that it matched up or echoed the Parthenon frieze, another ancient, what is it? I forgot what year BC, but in any event, another ancient reference to human movement, mass human movement.
Yes, and also holistic in a way, because it is in a temple. So these characters are going on repeating this cycle for eternity, basically. So it is that same idea that I bring for the Walgreens windows, and the same for the Exodus in the multimedia installation presented at Corsicana. Is trapping these characters in this eternal parade. And as for it was a little bit difficult to bring this idea of the loop, which is my work, especially the video work. So in the paintings, it was basically how do I solve this issue of the loop? How can I translate that into this painting format, which is, so it was me being all these characters and making sure that people can recognize that is the same person. So it is.
You played all the characters. That is you. Correct?
Yeah, I created all the characters, and it's I played all the characters, and it's basically this person behind the mask is going situation or similar situation over and over again. It doesn't matter which terrain or which gender or personification, it is the same situation over and over again. So that's how I translate this medium, which is a multimedia installation, immersive environment, into this still frame, very formal format placed on a wall.
The sort of philosophical sort of references that come to mind are, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, through Giambattista Vico, the Corsi, Corsi, the totally different visions of time, not the usual sort of Western sense of like progress, straight line, and things get better and better, but rather, you're on this sort of hamster wheel eternally, right? And you have these moments of exodus that come and go and ebb and flow and on and so forth. I want to get back to the masking for 2 seconds, because I think you told me this, or I read this somewhere, that the masks that you're using here are traditional festive masks that you sourced. Did you source them in Ecuador?
Yes, the masks are from Ecuador, and they are made out of paper mache, and are originally from Ecuador, but they're also used in Colombia. for similar purposes. These are used for religious celebrations as well as viejos, which is this life-size paper doll, and that represents the past year. So this paper doll is burned at midnight and on New Year's Eve, not before beating the crap out of it. So you release everything that happened to you through the past year. So it's this idea also of transition into the new year. So it has this symbolism of transition, travel from one place to the other, in time at least.
The part that sort of I found particularly interesting is that on the one hand, these are used for ritual celebration, but they're also for anonymity, obviously, but in anonymity for ritual celebration, but also ritual scapegoating, which is something we've seen quite a bit of in terms of the making human beings who are undergoing this kind of exodus presently. We've seen a lot of scapegoating as certain folks cash in on their, frankly, mischaracterization. Let me just not necessarily rewind, but just sort of go to your practice as a multimedia artist, right? In a way, you're frankly like a poster boy for the term, right? Because you deal in video, you deal in performance, you deal in installation, you're making paintings. How did this start? What was if there's an acorn that becomes this oak of your practice, what is it? Did you start out by drawing and like making collages from Vogue magazine like a million other artists, or was it something else?
Well, this work, let's start with the series landscape. So this work was a reaction and influence, if I want to say, from the specific space where this project was created. So it was this building that has a historic reference to everything that I mentioned before, the rituals, the reenactments of all and so. But from that point, conversations with other resident artists to how this can develop, and also overstocking on material. I was shooting video there to make this multimedia installation, but also having some photographs that I could use later on. So starting playing with this photograph, putting different type of backgrounds instead of the charcoal drawings that are prominent in my multimedia installation work. I started designing them digitally and doing these compositions. So the first composition is the painting, the yellow one. I don't know if you can put it on, Danny, which is basically just the vastness of a landscape. In this case, it's desertic terrain, and putting these characters not anchored to any surface, just levitating there in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, and for the creation of these works, the paintings, it's most of them happen already in my mind. I created them. I created there, and it's just a matter of materializing them, basically.
But you never wanted to, even before you started thinking through the work that became Landscape, all three iterations. You didn't start out by being a painter. You didn't start out by being a photographer. You didn't start out by being a video artist, did you? Or
no, it become the medium, or the project is presented. It's basically, it needs to be the specific medium that is going to tell the story. For example, video work, which is a time-based medium, helps me to talk about history and this loop and these repetitive cycles. But in this case, the paintings, which is not a time medium, helps me talk about the formality of landscape and landscape paintings. So, and the horizontal format. But in this case, I contradict this idea by presenting a vertical format and questioning and paying attention on the landscape part of it.
No, I get that. I mean, it's more of a biographical question, really, than a question about this specific or suite of works. But let's talk about the fact that these paintings, again, titled Landscape, are vertical rather than horizontal, which is usually the way sort of landscape represents it, correct?
Yes.
What led you to make that decision?
So they're presented as a portrait format. So the focus is on the characters in the act of escaping. So, and escaping what? Escaping the land. Which land? Then it starts. It's just conversation part of it. Yeah. So, but also considering the formality of the white walls, the institutionality of the space, and how being very formal with these paintings, which are on canvas, and with these characters and the composition and the color theory and all of that, can become an installation. And having these other elements, found objects, interact with it and interrupt, and pushing that idea of just a gallery into a space that the viewer can walk across and also affect the work in a way or another, and also, yeah, be separated from the work with this.
Well, let's talk about the color in the paintings, right? I mean, you know, we're looking at the one on the right in particular feels quite Floridian in its color scheme, right? The one on the right, not so much. The one on the left is titled Beach, in fact. So, you know, you're doubling down on sort of the Floridian sense of things as it's presented there. What about the titling, for example, and the color scheme? How did you arrive at those?
Yeah, so the color scheme, it's these blocks of colors and their compositions are arranged, and so the focal point is the colorless figure, this achromatic human being there. Some colors are minimalistic representations of, well, these are minimalistic representation of characters, sometimes more abstracted than others, especially the one on the left, which is titled Abyss. And we have this character at the edge of a cliff, and this is the only one not centered in the space, in the composition, I mean. So the title just gives the reference to this descriptive reference of these different types of landscape that people go through, and brings again this idea of the landscape paintings to reference a landscape, but with the focus of the escape, which is the subject, which is performing that act.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at two on earlier pages. One is Pampa, and it's sort of a sky blue, which obviously sort of refers to the sky, and there we go. And then the brown sort of horizon there, pardon me, the blue horizon and the brown earth. And Pampa, of course, is, you know, a flatland essentially, right? And
yes.
then on the right we have Cerro, which in Spanish means hill, and you know, you have essentially a very minimal or geometric, minimalist geometric version of what a landscape looked like, of a representation. And these folks, again, these characters, your recurring characters, sitting on one of their more sort of distinctive, um, one of the more distinctive elements that sort of define them, which is, I mean, they're suitcases, right? Um, it, you know, it, I think I mentioned in the essay that's in the catalog, how much these reminded me of Jacob Lawrence's Great Migration series. And he referred to the work to those pieces, and there are 60. We don't have images of them here, but for those who know that series, there's 60, 8.5 basically by 11 panels. Together they can form what I think is, one of the great, almost murals, American murals of all time. Curiously, they are up now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, if anyone is in New York and cares to see them. But he referred to that pared down style that got him to those 60 panels as dynamic cubism, which made me think of yours at a completely different scale, which I find fascinating. I don't even know if you had thought about Lawrence's series before you put brush to canvas here or not, but maybe you can tell us. If you didn't, the references are, or the echoes are uncanny and fantastic.
Yeah, I came to see Lawrence's work a few years ago at the MoMA. Yeah, I think it was 2019, something like that. And yeah, I did not take it as a reference, but it stays there in the unconscious.
Of course,
definitely. Course. And yeah, I really love that series. That was one of the most powerful during that exhibition. Yeah, I stayed there for hours analyzing every single panel, and yeah, it has the same. This work has the same idea as these characters and their presentation, the anonymity, the blocks, the distorted landscape. So there's all of that.
And of course, the historical migration that Lawrence is referring to is the migration of 6 million African Americans from the Jim Crow South to the cities of the North and West in the United States, in the American continent. But what you're talking about is this global thing that's sort of happening now, right?
Yeah.
That, I don't know, that folks are, among them, the New York Times and sort of major climate scientists are referring to as the great climate migration, right? It strikes me that the subject is, of course, I mean, I know we're all in the middle of COVID-19, so it's difficult for in the middle of this dreadful election process, weirdly polarized election process. But the next massive issue we all have to deal with is not just global warming, but more specifically climate change and the mass migrations that that's driving already in Asia and and clearly in the Americas. And I know, or at least I think I know, that is largely what you're onto here.
Yeah, it's just the way I see it is merging the history and the present, and this is happening all over and over again. It's the same thing that at the turn of the century I had to migrate with a lot of other South Americans that were our countries were really bad, in a really bad position financially, economically. Ecuador just changed the currency to dollars during that time. So everybody that had some savings just vanished and everybody started migrating. So it's in a period of 8 years, starting I think in 96 to 2004. a lot of migration, at least from Ecuador, started going into Europe and New York especially.
And did you, is that where you landed? You landed in New York?
No, I came here to Florida. My two sisters were already here, and previously two aunts who came in the 80s.
Yeah. One thing I want to sort of point out to the audience, and it'll be difficult to see unless you're sort of in the gallery, is that obviously there were a couple of shots of many of the paintings. It's a narrow space. They're facing each other, right? But they're
Yes.
all pointing in a single direction towards the exit sign.
Yes. So the idea is they're considering all of these elements of the space of the gallery. So we have these parallel walls and also an exit sign on one of the ends of the walls. And so it's just considering how can I make this work relevant to the space. So it fits the space. So all the symbolisms work together. Not only these characters with the barbed wire, but also the exit sign.
Let's sort of talk about the book a bit. This is your first book?
Yes, this is the first book that collects all of these different iterations and presentation of the different landscape projects.
And who else is involved in the book? Who else is writing?
So we have the first writing by Alison Cleon. She's a curator in Texas, in Dallas. And she wrote this essay for our exhibition, Reenactments of a Perpetual Cycle, which was this exhibition of these two, well, myself included, two artists during the residency period in Corsicana, Texas. The next essay or excerpt from an essay comes from the South Florida Cultural Consortium exhibition by Amy Galpin. She's a curator of the Frost Museum here in Miami.
And also, go on.
And also another essay for the Bass Museum Walgreen Windows space that was written by Jonathan Clark and edited by Leilani Lynch.
So you basically, I mean, you have the landscape work now solidly between two covers. Is this the end of this set of works?
I don't know, but I think it was really nice to have all these put together in a book format. At least I don't see it to be the end for the paintings, as they can progress to different other characters in different situations and reference other parts of history and terrains as well.
Well, it's definitely not the end of the event. So, it'll need, and we'll hopefully have, you to continue to sort of comment on it. We haven't talked about this, and I mentioned this because you and I have talked about your work now on some occasion. But for some reason, it just struck me that I've never mentioned Giorgio Agamben to you. And he's, for those of you that don't know him, he's a philosopher who has recast his political philosophy around the idea of the refugee, that is the immigrant. So I want to read just one quote. I have this series of quotes that I keep in my computer when I remember to write them down or type them up. So he says, only in such a world where the citizen has been able to recognize the refugee that is the political survival of humankind today thinkable? And then further, we must abandon the fundamental concepts through which we have so far represented the subjects of the political, man, the citizen and its rights, but also the sovereign people, the worker, and so forth, and build our political philosophy anew, starting from the one and only figure of the refugee, again, the migrant, right? I mean, it's a lot to ask you to respond to any of that. If you have any response, I just wondered if that resonates with you, because I think Agamben is obviously onto something here. The figure of the refugee is suddenly, and the immigrant has become paradigmatic.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a broad subject, and well, I'm just gonna bring something that I saw in an exhibition in Europe. It was an art exhibition where that it really hit me like hard, and so there was this. It was more like design exhibition, and there it was the refugee flag made out of these vests, which are orange and black, and then seeing that same flag being carried by the refugee nation in the Olympics. Yeah. I was like, oh, goosebumps.
Yeah, no, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Well, yeah. It's like that design of that flag, at least for the contemporary times. But the symbolism brings together all of the generations and the generations that have migrated and somehow have feel represented or not on with the land, whatever the land it is that they inhabit or they went to.
Schematized into a couple of bands of color, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's immensely powerful. Well, okay, I think we're at about 4:50. I can't wait to sort of like get the book in the mail, my hot little hand, because I think, obviously it sort of provides like a very solid sum of this really, really powerful cycle of works that you've made again in just a few years. It's really, really impressive, Edison. I haven't said, of course, you know this, but Edison and I met through a mutual friend, his dealer in Spain, Sabrina Rani, who might be listening. If you are, Sabrina, big hello. But she sent me images of your work, and I have to say I responded immediately. It was powerful on first looking, and it continues to be tremendously powerful. So let me ask you this, Edison. Do you feel like you're making overtly political work? Is that something you embrace, or is that something
It just happens.
It happens naturally.
It just happens. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It is going from the local or even yourself. It's just expressing what is inside you and the experience that, well, I have experienced. So immigrating is something that very prominent here in Florida or in the US, and the way that I migrated compared to the other people that migrated that are close to me. Some had to cross the border and do the whole trip walking. So and seeing how like injustice these situations are because of, well, I had more money than you. So I came this way and you came this other way. So I got to overstay my visa. And then after a few years, I got to get my documents. But it's different for other people and other types of laws, like what I said before, between Cubans and whoever else wants to come to the state with this absurd law.
Or if you happen to have $1 million and you're willing to plunk some of it down,
Yeah.
you know, but it gives the phrase, you know, an accident of birth, a totally sort of different dimension, doesn't it?
But it's also questioning, at least this is stated in the Human Rights Declaration, that all human beings have the right to migrate, to leave their country and return. But this is being blocked by physical and barriers, but also different legal barriers as well.
And the demonization of migrants, you know, which
Yeah.
is happening all over the world, as we know.
Mhm.
You know, it you know, especially in this country where migration or immigration is such a fundamental sort of principle, right? It's part of the defining makeup of the country,
Mhm.
literally from, you know, the landing of the Mayflower, you know, forward. There's this line that I sort of stole from a guy named Debbie Wallace Wells, who wrote a book in 2019 called The Uninhabitable Earth. It's largely about climate change and climate migration, really, right? Where he says that, you know, the vast majority of citizen consumers inhabiting Western countries think of refugees as a failed state problem. That is, as like this socioeconomic fallout of like the countries of the global South. But then he sort of like starts giving, he starts providing the kind of frightening data that Floridians and Texans and Louisianans are facing right now in terms of floods and well, floods, frankly, and hurricanes and insane weather patterns, all of them caused by climate change, that are turning them into migrants. So, you know, in a way, you know, your work really lands even within the continental United States with a resounding thump.
Yeah. And that's the idea, is being unspecific so it can play with the different types of discussions about the same issue. So in a global spectrum. Yeah. So it is not focused on a specific Central America and coming to the US and yeah, let's keep them out. No. Or let's do this.
Or let's keep them in or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not specific about any kind of policy change.
Yeah. It's just putting the work out there to have a conversation.
Right.
And a perspective, and it's a different type of experience, at least with the multimedia installation, and the idea of learning from experience. So if I put the viewer in a situation that they at least can experience 3% of what it's like crossing a border or carrying this type of luggage for hours and hours, and yeah, it's just putting the viewer, giving the viewer a perspective and a position also in
Right.
work to affect it or to react or not. It's not a responsibility either.
No, totally. Like the Jacob Lawrence panels individually and together, you know, I think your landscape works really sort of function as prompts, right? Prompts for conversations, or like you said, or not, you know,
Yeah.
for reflection or not. Well, in that they are sort of tremendously powerful. Well, if we have no questions.
Not
Jenny?
so far.
Okay, well, let's consider going directly.
We are gonna close with the video.
Yeah, let's close with the video. So let me say thank you for everyone who tuned in, and thank you to the gallery and thank you to Edison for having me on to have this conversation with you.
Thank you as well, Christian. I really appreciate all your support on these projects and also the exhibition at USF, which is amazing for the format as well. It's really, really good.
Yeah, well, I should say that the video that we're gonna go out with is again up on the dedicated USF CAM Contemporary Art Museum University of South Florida dedicated platform, Life During Wartime exhibition.org if you care to go. And this video is up with the rest of Edison's contribution. Check it out if you get a chance. This is, I think, 3 minutes and 40-second clip. And with
I'm gonna
that,
cue it in. Yeah.
yes, I say goodbye.
We had a comment from William Morrow. Thank you,
Oh.
William, saying thank you and fantastic discussion. So
Oh, good.
Thank you,
William,
William.
what a smart guy William is. Hi, William. Look carefully at Edison's work. Do you know William Edison?
No.
You might soon. Very interesting guy. All right.
all right, thank
And out we
you.
go with it.
Bear with me while I share the